Hi, everyone. SiouxperCon Shane back here. I'm so pleased to welcome our next guest. Must have been about 6 to 8 years ago. I tried to recruit Terry Moore for a event down at the Yankton Library, and he turned me on to this young man. I was very impressed by him. I think Ethan was still in the womb then, but awfully young regardless. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you one of the most amazing young talents I've seen come through the scene for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ethan Castillo. Ethan, thanks for joining us at SiouxperCon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I see what you did there with the super excited. I like it. I like it a lot. So that's an amazing. By the way, I hope you, as you're all seeing that wonderful banner behind Ethan, that is just a small example of his amazing artwork. Ethan, first off, can you tell the crowd just how old you are?
I just turned 16 years old in August. So I am a junior in high school, and yeah.
Yeah, so junior in high school. Golly, I don't know if I'd redo that or not, but so junior in high school, all the fun stuff. You're involved in sports. Did you guys start school back up yet?
We're doing all virtual. It's
all virtual online.
Yeah, we've been going for I think almost a month now.
Okay, you've been back in about a month. Yep.
Yeah, and they're starting to kind of set things back to normal a little bit for some sports and stuff like that. But it's mostly all virtual right now.
Okay. So where did your love of superheroes and comic books start, Ethan?
Spider-Man has been my favorite superhero of all time. I was introduced to comics at a very early age because of my dad, who is a huge comic book fan. And I remember, I think it was Mark Bagley's Ultimate Spider-Man run. That was probably the first comic book, one of those issues. I think it was the Symbiote comic arc. That was the first comic that I can remember picking up and reading. And that brought me, just a spiral of comic books, that's kept me engaged for several years and are still keeping me engaged. But yeah, it really came from my dad and his love for comic books and kind of finding some comic books and characters that I liked and just jumping down the rabbit hole and kind of exploring.
Yeah, I love that. When comic books become multi-generational, I think it's very important. My dad used to shove me a handful of comic books in the back seat when we had an hour and a half drive, which is much of an hour and a half drive to see my grandparents. And when we would go visit them, I had a stack of comic books. And then he would give me a few dollar bills. And I'm much older than you, Ethan. Comics were a quarter then. So like with $3, I could get 12 comic books, and I go down to the local drugstore, and then he would also read them. Now I've been able to pass that on to my son Derek. Yeah. I think that's just a beautiful story. That Ultimate Spider-Man of Bagley and Bendis, I think, was so important as a jumping on point for a new generation of fans that could come in without the continuity. Plus, it was fresh. It sounded like people talk now. There wasn't any G. Willikers or, gosh, darn it, Mr. Jameson. It was real, and it felt real, and it felt now. So I can see where you'd be very attracted to that. Now, were you attracted to the story first, Ethan, or the art?
Ooh. It was probably a mix of both. Like you said, that comic run in particular is very it captured a lot of people's attention because of how vibrant and fresh it was. In actual terms of the art and just the story and how they reinvented Spider-Man. For that one, it was probably first the art that captured me because I was very bad. I couldn't read the entire thing, and if there are bad words in the comics, they would be sharp. My dad would Sharpie them out, and we would hold those back, so I couldn't see them. But yeah, I think it had to do with both. They were both so. It was a different form of storytelling that I was not used to. Obviously, when you're a kid, you're reading a lot of picture books, and there's very few words. But when you have a mix of that, when you have all of this art right there in your face, and then there's text bubbles, and there's there's a million things happening. It's very engaging. It's very different than what you're used to. And I think that's that's kind of what separates comics from a lot of other forms of media, is like there are many ways to interpret it, and it's all there, if you know what I mean. So
Absolutely, I do.
yeah.
Yeah, we Scott McCloud talks about what happens in the gutters.
Mm.
Scott McCloud, one of the greatest writers about comic books that there are, and he talks about that in the gutters. And as a young reader, that's what attracted me. What's happening in between the panels that I'm not seeing, and then the imagination starts spinning, and you start filling in the story yourself. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of talking to a lot of amazing artists, Ethan, and every one of them talks about a piece of paper, whether that be lined or a piece of typing paper or an actual sketchbook, and starting and drawing their own comic as a kid with the characters they love. How quick did you grab the pencil after seeing that Spider-Man comic and start drawing your own Spider-Man or your own creation?
I almost immediately. I think that's kind of the answer that a lot of artists go back to. But I think I have very vivid memories of me at a daycare for a school, and I would staple these pieces of paper together, and I would have, they weren't even comics, but I would have like, I would call them, I forgot what I called them, like Ultimate Sketchbook 1 or 2. And I had just a bunch of lined pieces of paper, and each page was just drawings of different characters. So I had one page of just a bunch of Spider-Man drawings, one page of just a bunch of Venom drawings, and Batman, and, all of these different things put together. That probably sticks in my mind the most, in terms of like the first thing that I created through art. We have, my parents, we have videos of me, I don't know how old, but I'm scribbling stuff. You can't tell what it is, of course. It's just crayon and a bunch of crazy marks everywhere. But I'm telling the story. Like in the videos, I'm saying there's Doc Ock and there's Spider-Man. Doc Ock is a scary bad guy, and I'm trying to tell these stories. So I think those always stick out, because obviously I couldn't read very well. I couldn't even talk very well, but like having those stories in my mind, I think that was really important for me. And I don't know, I always go back to those stories, because those are always really fun to kind of think back on.
Absolutely. Storytelling is such it's universal, Ethan. I mean, it's when we start with verbal storytelling, and you can go back to, think of the art through history that they found, whether that be cave walls or engravings in stone or whatever they found. Art is the way we express ourselves, it's the way we tell stories. So as a young child, you were taking those beautiful ideas from your mind and putting them down and saying, this is my story.
Yeah.
How instrumental, Ethan, have your parents been in feeding your imagination, in letting you grow and go forward like this?
Immensely. I cannot thank them enough. They're my biggest cheerleaders and the greatest supporters that I could ever ask for. The thing is, they never pushed me to, want to like art or anything. It all came from me, and their support is what gave me the chance to do all of this. Obviously I can't thank them enough. And that support means everything, because it's not, again, if I didn't want to be an artist, I didn't have to. I could have said, right. I don't like this, and that's not what I want to do. And they would have been okay. They would have said, okay. And that means the world to me. So getting that, because I know there are a lot of people that don't get that support. And
yeah.
So I'm very lucky that I was gifted that. And I still try to, I do work my hardest that I can, because that's what I've been given, and I want to make the best of it.
Yeah. I can't remember who said it, but your children are your garden. Give them the food, the water, the sun that they need, and they will grow. And whether that be a football, a baseball glove, pen and paper, a musical instrument, a book, whatever it is. And I'm so happy that your parents put the tools in front of you so you could go like this. So a young person, mind going everywhere. So it's cartoons and it's comic books and it's Pixar and it's this and that and it's video games and it's friends and it's bike rides and everything. Where did drawing fit in? I mean, how much time did you start putting into drawing? When did this become a thing, Ethan?
Oh man. So it was around the time that I started to draw myself and kind of like, you
Hmm.
know, I think my dad and we started reading. I remember Miles Morales, like when Miles was first
Oh yeah,
introduced, we read that first issue. We read, I remember we read that entire storyline from the beginning as it was coming out. And like for me, that was a really important thing because first of all, it's just first time I ever read an actual arc as it was happening. So that right there was really special. Um, and we were also going to Comic-Con. And WonderCon. WonderCon used to be in San Francisco, I believe, so it was easier to get there. Um, and as that was happening, I started getting more surrounded by art, and I remember asking my dad, like, I don't know if it was at a convention or where, but after a convention, I said, when can I do this? When can I have a table? When can I become an artist? And at that point, it was kind of like, if you want to do this, we'll do it. So at Big Wow Comic Fest, I had my first table when I was 8 years old, and we
Wait
had
a minute. Time out. Time out. Time out. Time out. Time out. Time out. I had my first table when I was 8 years old. Okay, so I don't, and listen, the people watching this that have been to conventions, they've been to SuperCon, they've been to other conventions.
Mhm.
Um, the first table I had was 8 years old. I mean, there's your lead, Ethan. There's the header for every story that we tell on you. What was that like? I mean, holy smokes, So like, wow. I mean, I'm just like falling over here. So talk about that. You can get that's amazing, Ethan.
it was it was really an incredible experience. I met so many people that I admire, and so many people that have been instrumental in keeping me going. Most importantly, is there were a few. So, for example, I met Humberto Ramos, who
Yeah.
did the arc for he did Amazing Spider-Man, and he did some Superior Spider-Man too. Um,
Yes.
I met him when I believe it was 9. I think it was at WonderCon, and he was the nicest person ever. He still is. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for a few years, and he they are the nicest people ever. And so that was a great experience because a lot of people say don't meet your heroes, and that was the opposite. I They were exactly what I thought they were going to be, and they're nicer than I thought they were going to be. And just getting to experience that level, meeting people that you see their work you through comic books and all of that, but you don't know the person. You can listen to interviews and all of that stuff, but you don't really know them. So having that was really important to me. I think my Wi-Fi froze for a second. Uh-oh. Um,
Ethan, I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
We had a freeze up, but I did hit pause on the record, so we're
Okay,
just
perfect.
fine.
Okay. I met a lot of my heroes. I met Umberto. I met Ryan Stegman, who's also doing Superior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a nice guy. The thing is, all of them are so nice. And that has been some of the greatest experiences of my life, is going to those conventions and getting to meet the people that I look up to, the most in terms of my career and what I want to do. I had the pleasure of meeting Todd McFarlane. He was super duper nice. So it's that has been instrumental in keeping me going and pushing me, because I want to make these people proud. I want them to see that I worked hard and I was able to do whatever it is I want to do.
Yeah. So many young artists, so you're talking about, big stylized artists here, Umberto is very stylized. Of course, Todd McFarlane changed the way Spider-Man looks. I mean,
Yes.
influenced an entire generation. So a lot of when people start drawing, when they first pick up a pen and pencil, whether that be for pleasure or whether they plan to push themselves into a career in art, there's influences, right? So I look at, maybe I'll draw like Umberto, or maybe I'll draw like a McFarlane, or I'll attempt something as complex as Alex Ross, or whatever it may be. Who, early, when you first started picking up the pen, who were you inspired by, or were you trying to emulate anyone?
For sure, yeah. I think that's actually one of the faults that was one of the bigger faults that I made when I first started, was trying to be like Umberto or trying to be like Ryan Stegman in terms of my art style. I've definitely shied away from that in a sense now, where it's taking those influences and developing my own. But I remember a lot of the time it was reading through these comic books, reading through Superior Spider-Man or Miles Morales, and finding if I like there's a cool piece in the issue, I would draw that. And I would, I would draw that piece, draw that pose. Let's say an arm got cut off by a panel border. I wouldn't draw the rest of the arm because I didn't know what theirs would look like.
Sure.
So it was, for that, it was more about copying. And in art, it's not about copying. But of course, I did my own stuff too, but it was a lot of trying to capture that same style, the same way of color, and all of the artsy things that go with it, but trying to capture their art, which is not what my art should be.
Right.
Yeah.
You can be influenced by someone, certainly,
Yes.
Whether that be, a deeper, thicker line, or hatching, or whatever it may be, or dark shading, or very light finishes with a lot of color, whatever it may be. Certainly, there's only so many styles of art that are out there, right?
Exactly.
But we take a little bit from everything and develop our own style.
Yep. Yeah.
So you're out there and you're 8 years old. What are you producing at a table at 8 years old, Ethan?
So for example, for the first convention, it was very much just exposure, or I was trying to meet people and kind of get my name out there a little bit. I think for Big Wow Comic Fest, I think we had a handful of prints, and again, they were all inspired by pieces from Umberto and Ryan and a lot of my influences, and Todd Knock was another really big one. Dave Marquez was Dave Marquez, J. Scott Campbell. Those were huge influences, and a lot of those prints were pieces that I drew based on their pieces. I think I don't remember the first year we had a sketchbook. I think it might have been when I was 10 or 11. So we started doing that, and we don't do commissions. That's one thing that I don't do still. I do sketch covers outside of the cons or maybe during the cons, but not forced like with someone in mind. And sometimes we'll put those out if anyone wants to get those. But like I because I think when I started, I actually did a few commissions, and I remember there was one convention where I was up late because I was stressing about this piece.
Huh.
And as a 9-year-old, that shouldn't be happening.
Right. Absolutely
At a convention.
right.
Yeah. So we kind of held back from that. But yeah, so we had mostly prints, and that's actually kind of still what we do. And occasional.
Your sketchbooks are huge. I mean, your sketchbooks travel pretty well. I mean, that was my first exposure to you. Is Terry sent me one of your sketchbooks, and I'm like, well, this is pretty interesting. This kid's something. I mean, and it's you can see through your sketchbooks, you can see your progression, you can see your growth. It's kind of nice to have a little timeline there.
Yeah.
Of look what I was doing, look at where I'm going now.
For sure. Yeah, really quickly, like that's another thing that we kind of do at the conventions too, is we have little stickers that say, I don't know how many sketchbooks we have. I think it's 4. And the first one was maybe 9 to 10, then 10 to 11 was the next one, then 11 to 12, and then 12 to 13, or 12 to like 14 was the last one I think we did.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, now I'm trying to remember. I think that's the last one we did. But yeah, like seeing that progression is it's funny to always go back and look at those, because that art is not what I'm doing now by any means. No. But it is really fun to see that, and kind of like, this was just a few years ago, you know? But yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun to see.
So are you still doing, have you switched to digital drawing, Ethan?
I have. I have not. Yeah. I have not cut off traditional. In fact, I still do a lot of traditional. But digital it's become so useful in the industry now that a lot of people are making that transition. And I do mixes of, I do both. For example, like the comic book covers, like the blank covers, that's all traditional. But there are certain things that you can't normally do on traditional that you can do for digital, and those things are always a lot of fun to play with and really easy to experiment with. And digital has been a really, really prevalent thing in the last couple of years.
Huge. Absolutely. So many people switching over to it, especially, the first time I was really exposed to hearing it was through inkers, through Tom Wynn, using it so frequently. I mean, Tom was doing finishes on Doug Monkey's art, and was finishing on with surface. And I was just amazed at the quickness and the depth of line and everything. And so, yeah. What are you using for product, Ethan?
I've been using a lot of Wacom products, and their stuff is amazing. I haven't had any problems with them before. I'm using a Cintiq Pro 16 right now. And I've had it for a few years actually, and it's held up really, really well. I also got recently I got a Wacom 1, and I was using that for a few weeks, and that was a lot of fun to play with too. And then for software, I've been using Photoshop. I started with Manga Studio, now it was Clip Studio. I started with that for probably a year and a half, just to kind of settle into the digital format, because when I was a kid, I used to have like this older PC, and I used to use MS Paint, and just use like a mouse. And just use a mouse to draw with that. Of course, like it's funny because I remember when I was a kid, I used to look on YouTube and see all these amazing digital artists using things like Paint, or I guess they were using Photoshop, but I was like, that's the same thing as Paint, has the same capabilities. Definitely not, but I was watching those videos, and that really got me wanting to practice on digital. And when when I got older and started to do that, it's not easy. But it's definitely got a learning curve, but it's been a lot of fun to, again, just experiment with, because there's a lot of things that you can do here that you can't do traditionally. So yeah, it's been really fun.
Ethan, would you mind sharing with us,
Yes, of
drawing for
course,
us,
of
and
course.
showing us some of your process? And feel free, Ethan, to talk about the way that you do the work and what you're doing, what you're using. I think
Yeah.
this is really important because we have so many. A big Ethan, a big part of SiouxperCon is one of our goals is to educate, and
Hmm.
I think this is really important. We have a lot of young people turning in and viewing in, and I think it's important for them to see the process and drawing in inspiration. You can be the next person to inspire the next one here. So
That would be amazing. Can you see my Photoshop screen right now?
yeah, see it perfectly.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. So I obviously, you start with the blank canvas. That a lot of artists say that is the most intimidating part of creating, is looking at this and
Hmm.
saying, what do I want to see down? Like, what do I want to have the finished product look like, and how can I have that happen? And a lot of the times that's where it kind of like, honestly, a lot of the times that's kind of where it falls apart, is where you're thinking about, how can I get to this place fastest, or how can I cut corners and get to this piece immediately. It's not always how it works, because art takes time. Art is always, you never stop. The thing is, you never stop with a piece either. You kind of just take a break from it, or say, I'm not going to work on this anymore, because there's always something that can be done. Um,
Right, right. So many artists will say, you'll say, "Hey, that looks great," and the artist will go, "No, you
yeah.
see your flaws, don't you?"
Yes. Yeah. Um, the idea that like artists are their own worst critic is
Hmm.
very, very clear. So right now I'm just starting. I just threw down a gray background just so I have some value just to start with. My pieces, I'll do like, wow, my Photoshop is acting up a little bit. There we go. I'm gonna do a little Spider-Man bust kind of paint. But yeah, it's digital's a lot of fun, because like I said, there's a lot of things you can do that I wouldn't be able to do traditionally. I can't paint in real life. Like I'm actually, I don't do it a lot, so I have a lot of trouble with it. So this is this is kind of me trying to paint, and it's definitely pushed me to want to paint. So maybe that'll be something I explore in the future. But yeah, so I'll start with the layout. I have a reference image on my laptop right now that I'm kind of using to start off with, but I'm not gonna go 100% with that piece.
Sure, sure. So Ethan, how much have you studied? Because this is your layout of the human form, just even in quick sketches, is evident. Um, I was talking to Tom Wynn about this, who he started professionally at 16,
Mhm.
inking and working, and he said such a big part that he was pushed on was to study the human body, know how the
Yes.
human body actually looks. How much do you put into that right now, Ethan?
Um, Again, it's very different than it should have been. Like for starting artists, I would say that's like you said, that's one of the most important things to study, and it takes a long time. There's so
Hmm.
many resources out there, and um, I don't even think that I'm only just started. The thing is, like, I've only just started because I started honestly late for that. Because again, when I first started drawing, it was, how can I make my piece look like Humberto Ramos art, or how can
Sure,
I make it look
sure.
like Ryan Stegman? But that's not for me. I look back and think that's not what I should have been doing. I should have been learning the fundamentals. Well, I guess closer to mastering those, and 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 starting off with that. I think my art would have been very different than it is now. But I think it would be maybe more polished in terms of the fundamentals. And I think that's another really important thing. Um, but yeah, I spent a lot of time. I've actually recently got into 3D modeling a little bit. The last few years I've
Okay.
been doing it. I started using ZBrush probably last year, but I have not gone back into it in a while, which I really want to. Um, but I've been doing a lot of like costume and concept design. And with that, you need to master, the human anatomy and everything, because it starts with that. If you don't have the right setup, then your outfit's going to look completely not right. So I've been working a lot on that. I have some really great anatomy sculptures of, basic musculature. And I took 2 classes at the CG Master Academy online. And I took the analytical figure drawing and the head drawing and construction classes. And those classes were amazing.
Yeah.
I highly recommend CGMA for anyone who is starting, because they have classes for intermediate, beginner, and advanced, and they all are amazing. I've taken, I think, 5 classes from them now, and all of my instructors have been incredible. I've had a great time. I've learned so much, but I of course, there's still so much work that needs to be done, that I need to do, just to kind of get a clear sense of I guess a more polished sense of what of the basics, really.
Yeah, I've seen some of the costume work you're doing, some of the model work you're doing. By the way, everyone, follow Ethan on social media. The artwork that he throws up there that he says work in progress is ridiculous, because and it's fun to watch this. It's fun to watch someone grow, and it's fun to watch the creative process, because too often as consumers we're like, well, this is easy. That guy sits around and draws comics for a living. What a great, I mean, and it's not. It's hard work, and it's anatomy, and it's studying biology, and it's knowing how the body actually moves. And you don't have to be hyper realistic to do that. You just have to, but it has to look reasonable, right?
Yes, it has to make sense, and there has to be some sort of reality behind it, right? But yeah, so
because Humberto's characters certainly aren't hyper realistic, like an Alex Ross, or even a Terry Moore or a John Byrne. They have a very stylized look about them, but the bodies work, right?
Yes,
the heads over everything kind of fits.
Yes. That's perfectly said. It makes sense. It doesn't, there's nothing so far removed from reality that it looks, of course, like you said, there's a huge stylistic choice there, but again, everything feels human. It doesn't look, there's nothing that, like, you could say there's an extra muscle there. It's like, well, no, because this is based on reality, and there's just, maybe the arms are bigger or whatever it is. There's just some stylistic choice. And I think that's another thing too, is like, oh man, I lost my train of thought. I don't remember what I was going to say.
That's okay.
I had something in my mind that I forgot what I was going to say, but never mind.
No, I love that you said that it's a stylistic choice, because it 100% is a stylistic choice. It's a choice to draw it this way. It's a choice to do it. And so many artists will do that, Ethan. They will make a choice to do it, and it'll switch from book to book oftentimes. And character to character.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that's another thing too, is like going back to kind of one of the earlier things you said, is when people are looking at your art, and you, like I said, the artist is their own worst critic, but the person seeing the final product, they are not seeing the process. They're not seeing what goes into it, right?
Right.
So the reflection for someone to say, this piece doesn't look good, and they weren't there while the person was creating it, I think that's another weird thing, where it's kind of like, well, I mean, if you were given this chance, if you were doing the same thing, could you do it better, or how would you do it different? So I think it's an interesting kind of outlook to see to hear other people's opinions, and kind of how they would approach something, because I think, like, for example, critiques are really, really important in art, because it's another form of, like, how would this person do it, how do you see it compared to how I see it, So that's another thing that I was just kind of thinking about.
Yeah, it's a typical art class. We're going to do a still life,
Yeah.
and everyone sits around, and they're all looking at the same thing, but everybody's style, everybody's look is a little bit different, right? It's we may be looking at the same orange, typical. I remember from early art classes I took. Here's an orange, draw an orange. Well, it's a ball. No, but yeah, everybody looks at it differently. Or here's a vase with a flower, and you're going to see, if you have 20 artists looking at the same thing, you're going to see 20 different renditions of it, and that's one of the beauties of art.
Yeah. There was a convention recently. I'm sure you heard of it, Lightbox Expo, and that was for people in the industry. I was lucky enough to be a part of that, and there was one panel that I got to sit in. I got to see a little bit of it. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but a bunch of the pros had the attendees send in photos of themselves, and they had, I don't know how many, but they had a ton of people. I think it was in a Zoom call or something. And an attendee would send in a photo, a portrait of themselves, like just a normal picture, and they would have all of the artists draw that, like do a caricature of that same person. It was so interesting to see how different everyone else's was.
Right. Yeah.
It was incredible. None of them were. There were some that were similar, but they all had something different that made it that artist's piece, and it was really, really cool to see.
So this is very interesting to watch how you lay in the shadow and then the highlights as you work here. So light reference, or do you just work off of, so you said you are looking at, kind of a model on your computer screen, but do you work off light reference a lot, deciding here's the light source? Are you, to maintain continuity throughout the drawing, Ethan?
Kind of. There was a specific app that I found a few years ago. I think might be on my iPad actually. But there was one, it was a 3D referencing kind of app where you could move the light sources around, change the intensity, change the color, and it was in 3D, so you could rotate everything. But I don't know where the app is anymore. I'm kind of upset that I lost it, but I need to find that again because it was really useful. But a lot of, like, for example, this one, I'm going to be completely honest, is a lot like the reference image I'm using. This piece I'm drawing right here.
Yeah, sure.
But it depends a lot, because a lot of the times I'm also taking several pieces of reference and trying to make my piece from that. So, like, for example, a lot of the concept pieces that I've been doing recently, I've been making things like mood boards first, like kind of as a starting point to get into the aesthetic of the character, of the thing I'm designing, and try to establish my own design around that. And for that, like, I'm not copying a specific piece or anything. It's really like, I have this here to inspire me, and I'm going to make my piece. Right. So I think that I tend to, I think it's still a problem that I kind of encounter, is like, I tend to overcomplicate and just get so absorbed in a reference image that I love, like something that I want it to look like, and then I end up working my piece to look like that. But so I think that's honestly one of the biggest struggles for me that I had, and I still have a little bit, is trying to accept my piece for what it can be and pushing it to what I want it to be, if that kind of makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Absolutely. You hear writers talk about the same thing, right? Is try to lose the voice, because you'll read something, you'll hear someone's story, and you're inspired by it. Then you have to lose that voice.
Yes.
Or you're going to end up mimicking that voice.
Exactly.
It's kind of the same with art. You can be inspired, you can have reference, but then I think that the artist's eye, again, is more critical of his own work than others.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're going to see, oh my gosh, I totally stole that, or that's exactly like that, and I was trying to, I've heard that same story though, Ethan, in chefs who will say, oh, I tasted something, and then they'll be, oh, it tastes too much like that. Like I said, I've heard it in in writers. I've heard it in musicians. Musicians will hear something, be inspired, and they'll go, well, that sounds just like it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't, but you get stuck in your own head so much on
Yeah.
your reference point. Right.
Yeah. That's a good point, is like, it's, that is an interesting way, because like you said, you get stuck in your own head. I don't think a lot of people, I don't think it's as clear as I think it is. That for me, it looks like I'm copying this exact piece and everyone's going to call me out on it, and then I'm going to be ruined or whatever it is. But in reality, it's just like, maybe this lighting is very similar to this piece, and
Sure.
you're going crazy or whatever it is. So that is, yeah, that's very interesting. That it's probably a thing on my end that I'm overcomplicating.
Like I said, in any creative form, I have kind of tried to surround myself with creative people, and in every creative form, I hear this.
Yeah.
I mean, how many original ideas are there left out there? Of course, technology like you're using is going to continue to advance, which is going to allow for different stylization of work or a different way that the work is done. But still, Spider-Man is Spider-Man. Batman is Batman.
Yeah.
And I think the backlash would be worse, Ethan, if you go, nope, this is how Spider-Man actually.
Yeah.
People would crucify you.
Yeah. I agree for sure. And yeah, I think that's the thing, is like, everyone's free to interpret it however they want.
Right.
So I love that. I love how I like seeing different interpretations of so for example, like movies, I'm a big movie guy, and I like seeing the reviews for those films, even if they are very, I think the most interesting thing is when movies are when reviews are clashing, because I like to see how different someone's opinion can be, and I like to see that rationalization, like how do, and it's not like I'm making fun of them or anything. It's, I want to see how they see what they see, and how that differs from someone else. So I think that's always like really interesting, also.
Well, of course, yeah, and that goes back to different eyes, same thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of, so much is all based off of your own lens on how you grew up, on your background. How I see it at 52 years old is going to be very different on how you see the world at 16 years old. I mean, that's just reality.
Yeah.
So, Ethan, this is so cool to watch, by the way. I mean, guys, this is,
Thank you.
No, it is. We've had a couple other artists that have thrown in. So watching Kazu Kibiushi do drawing for us from Amulet, and he draws so fast. He draws so fast that it was shocking. He just does blue line, and he's in over it with graphite and done, and it's
That's
just
amazing.
so fast and so great. So yeah, this is so much fun to watch.
Thank you. I
To
appreciate
see,
it.
well, yeah, because it has such a depth with the color and what using it through a program like this can create. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So what is next, Ethan? What's next for you as far as, well, obviously high school, probably school.
Yeah, still high school.
But what's next in your journey with art? What is the next step for you?
Interesting question. The thing is, like, I don't know.
Okay, that's so fair. You're 16.
Yeah, but I'm also, that's another thing too, is like, I've been really lucky because I've known what I wanted to be forever.
Right.
I've known that I wanted. Of course, I don't know exactly where I want to work or what position or anything, but I know that I want to be an artist. I know I want to do something with art, and it's not something that's going to be fleeting, because it's stuck around this long, and I've been this passionate about it for this long. Of course, you can always, it possibly could, but I don't see it happening. And I think that's part of the fun, is like, I don't know where I want to go yet. In terms of what I want to do, I because it's always changing. I remember for a few years ago, I think for a few years ago, and then up until maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I just wanted to be a comic book artist. like just comic book artist, and that was set in stone, and that was what I wanted to do. And then I started to really get into movies and television and video games again. And I now want to be a costume designer or a visual development, something in visual development, concept art, anything. Because that's another type of art that's like, it's kind of hidden, honestly, because you always see in the films, you always see what the outcome is. You see the mixture of the, all of the people working together to make the outfits, and you see the designers, and you see all that put together, but like, it's kind of hidden a lot of the time. So I'm a sucker for concept and costume design. So I don't know. That's the thing, is like I really am still trying to figure that out.
Good for you. Good for you, Ethan.
Yeah, I think
you're right where you're supposed to be, buddy.
Yeah.
Figure it out, man. Hey, one thing I hope, make sure that see if you can catch the panel that we have with Mike's show. Mike is a Pixar animator, and so he talks a lot about this same thing, about the concepts and how exciting that is.
Yeah.
So see if you can catch that panel for sure.
Do you know what day that is?
I think Mike's going to be on Sunday. It'll be a Sunday, second day. But I'll let you know for sure, Ethan. But yeah,
Awesome.
I think you'd find a lot of interest in that one.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
No, and you're right. So, I mean, even if we take just the pure comic book form, and traditionally we have a writer, 1, a artist, 2, an inker, 3, a letterer or colorer, 4, and color and then letterer, 5. 5 people per panel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're right. People don't see this, and to have the concept and to be able to direct some of that, art director, storyboard, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting to be the guy kind of molding. That would be kind of a cool.
That would be
gig,
incredible.
Ethan.
Yeah, and I that's another thing that's kind of been happening recently at like some of the more recent conventions for the past few years, is like I've gotten to know Ryan Meinerding and Andy Park, head of visual development at Marvel Studios, and of course a ton of other artists that are in the industry. Phil Butte he's a character costume designer for Marvel. He taught the costume design class that I took at CGMA that I just finished.
Awesome.
So like all of that stuff has been really, really cool to kind of, surround myself with. And I'm very lucky that I get to be a part of, everything that's been happening. So yeah, it's definitely very interesting. I'm really excited to see what's next. I think that the only thing that I can that's for sure is college. I need to figure out what college I'm going to go to. So yeah, we're kind of looking into that.
Sure. There's some great schools in South Dakota, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Well, that's another thing.
I'm just trying to steal all the talent, because if you were, if you're here, I could just have you show up, all the time doing stuff.
That's true. Yeah.
What are you reading right now, Ethan? What
am I reading?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's okay. Honestly, I have not been reading a lot of comics. I have not had a lot of free time. It's weird. I feel like I've been actually surprisingly busy during quarantine, more than I thought I was going to be. It's like I've worked on a few projects, and I'm still doing school and everything, and
sure.
And I'm getting ready.
I think that's let's stay busy. I have to do something, right? So I think that especially a creative person is going to seek out ways, because otherwise, I'm not saying your head's going to actually explode, but your head's going to explode, right?
Yeah.
If I can't get these out, if I can't find a way to release this, right? So that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
That you were more busy. So what are you watching?
I've actually gotten really into YouTube, and not even like, I've been watching a lot of video essays. So I've kind of gotten back into video games, and a lot into the kind of like the storytelling aspect of video games.
Sure.
Because I've been a gamer for a little bit. Like I've played games probably all my life, but those games were very focused on Spider-Man or Batman or superhero games, and that was it.
Sure.
And I started recently playing a lot of different types of games that I never thought I would play, and the storytelling in them, I think I've been kind of like, I've been playing just the best games. That's probably what it is. But because honestly, like, I feel like I'm getting spoiled by just the good games. So then when there's something that's a little bit not as solid, then I'm like, I don't know if this is good storytelling. Because that's,
well, no, I get that when no matter what form it is, right? Whether it be, wow, this is amazing, and now this one after it, really,
yeah,
really, this is what I got.
But it's actually been a really cool time to be a gamer just because of the storytelling that's happening. There are some amazing video games that are some of the most memorable forms of media, or most memorable forms of storytelling that I could think of. I don't know if you've played like the Last of Us games.
No.
Oh.
No, I have not.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Yes.
I've seen the trailers for them. I've
Yeah.
seen the trailers for them, and I remember the first trailer I saw for it. I thought this is going to be a great movie, and they're like, it's a video game, and I'm like, what?
Yeah. Even if you're not a gamer, if you like good storytelling, I cannot recommend those games enough.
Cool.
I was very late to the game in terms of like those games, for example. The first one came out, I think, 7 years ago, and I only played it 5 months ago.
Wow. Okay.
And it, like, the first and second games are some of my favorite games of all time now, and I just found out about them. They are incredible storytelling. There's so much amazing world building, so much that goes into the art, and I've been like surrounding myself with that kind of aspect of video games. So like just the development. I've been watching a lot of documentaries on making video games. That's probably the thing that's been taking up the most time in terms of what I'm watching, because I'm not really watching a lot of shows right now, and I'm not really watching a lot of movies either. But yeah.
So is video game design, in that book of maybe this?
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe this is the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think there's because it comes down to, what do I want to do in terms of like in terms of my art, obviously, because that's what I want to work on. And there's so many types of positions for artists at video game companies and just anything, film or television. I don't know. I think costume design has always kind of been a hidden thing that I've always wanted to do in my mind, and I never really thought of doing that until kind of recently. Because as a kid, like, for example, Spider-Man outfits, like the different costumes, the different looks, just the way that different artists drew the classic suit, that was always so appealing to me. And I always liked that side of it. So I think
Isn't it
that's
amazing
always,
though? I mean, you can, all the different changes in Spider-Man suits, but it still goes back to that classic Ditko.
Yeah.
Blue. Red.
That's my favorite. The Ditko Spider-Man suit is probably my favorite Spider-Man look of all time, just because it's so, they really created like the most iconic,
he really did.
I don't even know, most iconic just superhero outfit of all time. It's so everyone knows what it is.
Well, of course they do. It's worldwide recognizable, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Superman S or the Mickey Mouse ears. There are certain images that transcend language, transcend culture,
for sure,
transcend age.
Yeah.
That this is, everyone knows when you see the red and blue pajamas with stripes on them, that it's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So there's video game design. How about animation, Ethan? Is animation something that you are looking towards? Is that something you're looking to pick up?
That is actually another skill that I do want to kind of focus in on at some point, but I haven't really gotten I haven't really done it a lot. I've done a few, like I've done a little bit of 2D, and I took a class, a very short like summer class, just at, I forgot where it was. It was just a really short class, for, I think it was Introduction to Maya. I don't even remember. It was an introduction to 3D animation, and it didn't really stick with me. I don't remember a single thing from that class. Like honestly, I wish I did, no, because it's, you know, it's super useful, but I can't recall anything from it. But I would love to. I think animation's really cool, but even that, if I wanted to go into animation, I feel like it would go more in the character design route as opposed to like actual animation and you know, all of that stuff. And I mean, I'm still a huge fan of animation.
Going with that. I love where your mind's going with that, because that shows the creativity that you possess. So if I have, you know, just the ability to create the look, maybe I've got the next iconic look in me. Maybe my character is the one that's mimicked, right? That's something, you know, that's beautiful, man. I really dig that, because it's something, Ethan, honestly, it's something that I don't hear, right? So,
You froze on my screen. Sorry, Shane, I can't hear if you're talking right now. I think you froze on my screen. Let me see. Hello?
hi, Ethan.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, you froze on my screen for a little bit.
Yeah, you did too, but it's okay. We're good.
Right.
Hey, guess what? I'm sending this to the video guys. They're going to fix all this. They're going to make us look like pros.
Yeah. Awesome.
No, we have. So I got to interview Martheus Wade, who went from video games into comic books, and you know, from graphic design. You know, so many artists go from design into comic books, or they went from comic books into video. I think you're the first person I've interviewed, talked to, heard a lecture from, whatever this is. No, character design. I just think that's beautiful, man. It's such a unique take. It's so important, because costume and comic and character design, you can go across the board.
Yes.
Ethan, you want to talk about opening up a career?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because like, again, I don't want to single out any possible career, because I'm open to do anything that interests me. I still love comic books, and I would totally be down to do comic books after or before anything. It just depends on what I see, obviously what I'm most drawn to, and what I see I could do the most for, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And the great thing about animation is it's look at storyboards and movies.
Yeah.
So much is CGI illustration now. the need for characters, for background characters, as we expand, and I think we're going to continue to see the expansion across the platforms of huge epic, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead. You're going to continue to see these where there's going to be a need for character design.
Yeah, of course.
How can I transfer this from the page to illustration, and now from illustration to the screen? So I think don't pigeonhole yourself, because there's a whole world out there that just having the skill of illustration like you do, it opens up so much.
Yeah.
I mean, advertising, whatever you name. I mean, you could put your fingers into everything. Have an empire, Ethan, an empire, I say.
Yeah, it's really fun. There's like you said, there's so much that's possible, and getting to explore that. And that's another thing too, is going back to what I said earlier, is like I'm just lucky that I know that I want to do something with art. There are a lot of people a lot of people even my age that still don't know what they want to do. And of course we still have time, we're still young. But it's like, I'm very fortunate that I was lucky enough to find that one thing that keeps me excited, and I don't see myself ever shying away from that.
Right.
Whatever form that takes in terms of career, I'm game. I'm really excited, and I want to.
Well, that's secondary, right? I mean, you're just being in the animation field, and to be so blessed to do something that you love, to be able to take that. And here's a little spoiler alert for you, Ethan. I have people my age who don't know what they want to be when they grow up either. So,
yeah.
This is so amazing to watch this process of just flat red, and then coming in with the different tonalities, finding the light source, bringing it through, and then bringing the costume over the top of it. It's really cool to watch.
It never gets old. It never gets old for me. Doing this, because I it's always different. There's always something that maybe goes wrong or I just don't like, and there's always something new about every time I draw Spider-Man. Because a lot of times people ask me, how do you draw Spider-Man so much and not get tired of it? And there's always something different, and just finding new ways to show this character, I think is a lot of fun.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and how can you get tired of this at all?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, wow. I know this isn't 3D rendering, but it looks so 3D.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good. And that, you have a great eye for shading and color, Ethan. You really do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we'd love to have you, come our way for an actual convention, and hopefully we're, 2021. We have vaccine, can do things safely. We'd love to have you out.
I'd love to be there.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. So, Ethan, what advice would you give to our young artists who are watching this panel, who are just picking up a pen, or maybe they're at one of the they've decided, like you, I want to do something in art. This really inspires me. So what words of wisdom or what advice do you have for others that like you are so moved by animation, are so moved by art?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop drawing because I need to think about this.
No, not a problem at all.
So I think on the actual art side, start with the fundamentals. I know it's very tempting to go right into how to make, how to shade with Photoshop or whatever it is, but starting with the fundamentals, lighting, just form, that stuff is most important. So start with that.
Complementary colors.
And you don't need to get into the technical aspect, because you can always do that. I'm literally still doing that. So I would say that for the art side. And then in terms of I think the most important thing for me and for everyone is, make sure you're willing, make sure you love it, make sure you're willing to put in the effort, because it doesn't happen overnight. And that can be said for anything too. Because you have to be willing to take time out of doing something else to focus your energy in doing this. And it's, like I said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen over a year. It's not going to happen over 2 years. It never stops. That's the thing too, is you keep putting in the effort, and you're going to keep getting better, and you're going to keep growing. There are going to be hard times where you hate your piece. Believe me, I've been there. I've been there so many times, and I still get there, today. But at the end of the day, it's what can you take away from what you've done, and how can you grow from it as a person and as an artist? So I think you have to find that love. You have to find that true love for your work, because if you're not willing to love it, then you're not going to be willing to, to do it. So yeah, and be open to different types of art, be open to, different careers. I don't know. I think that's the most important things.
Yeah. I think that I love learn from it, right?
Yeah.
So why don't I like this piece? What could I do differently with it? Rather than this is no good. Because then you're just creating a roadblock. You're not creating an opportunity to learn. And everything that we do should be an opportunity to learn. So I didn't like this piece. Why didn't I like it? But what did I do well in it? And where could it be improved? What did I learn to take to the next piece that would help me? Yeah, that's great words. And I think important to hear for any age and for any career, for any passion, for any hobby.
Yeah, and another thing, actually, really quick, it's kind of goes with what you said. Listen to other people. Of course, there are things like haters, and people are going to say, "Oh, this sucks," but there's also going to be those people that are trying to help you, because there's always going to be someone better than you. That's the thing. So be willing to listen to those people. Be willing to accept, you have to accept that there are people better than you, and that it doesn't matter, because they're not on the same. You may be on the same road, but you didn't start at the same time. You're not. There's no need to compare.
Right.
So be willing to take that advice. Be willing to take criticism, because there's always going to be someone better than you, and taking that advice is only going to help you. That's
right.
So that's another thing. But yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's perfect. Ethan, we're getting close to time here. And
I think this is actually done.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
For sharing your gift with us. That's amazing.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad I was able to be part of it.
I was really excited. And from a personal note, I haven't had a chance to thank you face to face, but Ethan, thank you for the drawing you provided for Derek.
Of course.
That was amazing. He loves it. He has it right in his sketchbook. So he treasures it, and your sketchbooks. So that was very nice of you to do, and we appreciate it. Ethan, this is I think so important. We have a school here in Sioux Falls that is kind of focused for kids that there's the signature. I love it. For kids that are kind of more focused in technical, in music and arts and drawing. And I would love to have you speak to them, come out and speak to them, because they love coming to SiouxperCon. Yeah.
That'd be incredible.
Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing Ethan Castillo. Please follow him on social media and click the link. Go to your SiouxperConline landing page. Click the link. You're going to find Ethan's store. He has things available. But seriously, follow this guy, because then you'll be able to say, I remember when I first met Ethan at SiouxperConline, and I knew he was going to be somebody. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad I was able to be here.
You bet. Stay safe, Ethan.
Yes.
Say hi to your dad for me.
Yeah. Say hi to Derek for me.
I will, for sure, for sure.
Awesome. Stay safe, guys.
Okay, everybody. Yep. Stay tuned for our next guest.